Come in, find a seat. We'll start our lecture in just a moment. For those of you who don't know, this is Fictional History 101. I'll be your fictional historian and lecturer, Aaron Johnson. While we wait for everyone to sit down, let's go over what this class is going to cover. We're going to be talking about the history inside different stories and settings. What I mean by this is if it's a piece of fiction with some history, we'll be going over it just like any other history class. Before we get into that though, we'll take a little while to go over the history behind the story itself, to give an idea about the circumstances that led to a particular bit of fiction. It looks like everyone is settled in, so let's get out a sheet of paper and pen and start our lecture. With that out of the way, let's begin. There is a show that was a cornerstone of 1970s science fiction. It featured mature themes set in the vastness of space. With a cast of likable characters and many ideas that were ahead of its time, it would unfortunately face premature cancellation. Only years afterward, spurred on by TV reruns, movies, and a surprisingly robust toy line, would the series come back stronger than ever. There are some who would think I'm talking about Star Trek, but instead I'm looking eastward, to Japan. Today we're going to talk about another show that featured all of these elements. Mobile Suit Gundam. Released in 1979, Mobile Suit Gundam was a Japanese anime that told the story of a war-torn future. Directed by Yoshiyuki Tomino, the show would air from April 7, 1979 until January 26, 1980, and spanned 43 episodes, though only just barely. From these humble 43 episodes, the series would go on to spawn a half-dozen series that would follow Mobile Suit Gundam, not to mention an array of movies, alternate universe settings, manga, video games, and even rides. To understand where this long legacy comes from, it's important to look back at the anime industry of the 1970s. Giant robot shows were fairly common for the time. Shows like Mazinger, Combattler, and to a lesser extent Get a Robo were very typical of the genre at the time. Each featured a young man or team of kids being granted a large and powerful robot, usually referred to as a mecha, with which they would fight monsters or aliens. Every episode revolved around a new monster being sent down from the series villain for the young kids to defeat. These shows were meant to be more in line with mindless fun. Morality was fairly straightforward, and the heroes were easily identified from the villains. In addition, the robots functioned on a pseudo-magic for the most part, with few, if any, hard limits on what they could or could not do. When Gundam first aired, it turned these conventions on their ear. Series director Tomino wanted the mecha or mobile suits of the show to have a more realistic appearance compared to the more fantastic robots of other anime at the time. This left them somewhat smaller than many of their contemporaries and gave them a hardier appearance. They became less characters in the story and instead became tools for the main characters and villains to use. In addition, Tomino shifted the series' depiction of morality away from the norms of the time. Rather than having two very easily identified sides, he pushed for a more nuanced conflict. He noted in an interview, "Most of the war-related dramas and movies were quite one-sided, described from one perspective. However, war is something where millions of people meet and fight each other, each believing in justice on their own sides. Mecha anime tends to be one-sided, but considering more objectively, I thought I should describe war from both sides." To this end, he spent a portion of the series showing the lives and feelings of the show's antagonistic Zeon forces, giving more humanity and understanding to the antagonists and their goals than most other shows at the time would offer. He also depicted the use of nuclear weapons, genocide, and the horrors of war inflicted on both those fighting and those at home. In all, the show was a far darker outing than many other robot shows being aired, as well as being more grounded in reality. Although it would not be until years later, this change in style for the show would go on to coin its own term, the real robot anime. While other robot animes focused on the robots fighting with giant monsters, these real robot animes put the emphasis more on the characters and the setting around them. These shows would also be much more grounded in reality than their super robot counterparts, featuring science that tended more towards reality than 200-foot-tall robots punching each other. While Mobile Suit Gundam marked a very different turn from the robot anime that proliferated television at the time, it did work to its detriment when it first aired. Audiences didn't connect with the show's darker themes and war-filled atmosphere. Mobile Suit Gundam was originally scheduled for 52 episodes, as was largely the standard. However, it faced early cancellation due to its low ratings and was reduced to 39 episodes. Although the team was able to extend the run of the show to 43 episodes, it still ended earlier than the initially planned run, resulting in a shortened ending. After the show's run, Clover, one of the show's sponsors and the series' toy manufacturer, sold the toy-making rights to another company, Bandai. While Clover released its toys as die-cast figures, Bandai released much cheaper plastic models that required paint and glue. These toys were hugely successful, in large part due to their much cheaper price tags. The Bandai models ran around 300 yen, or about $3, which made them much cheaper than the die-cast toys that Clover had been releasing. Between the popularity of the model kits and the increasing interest in reruns of Gundam that had been airing, the stage would be set for Gundam to begin its long-running franchise. So what was Mobile Suit Gundam actually about? Well, it was still fairly typical for the time. A 15-year-old boy, Amuro Ray, comes to use an experimental Earth Federation robot referred to as a Gundam during a surprise attack by the Principality of Zeon. He uses the Gundam to fight off the Zeon forces, beginning a long-running rivalry with an ace Zeon pilot, Char Aznavour. Amuro and the crew of the experimental ship White Base head to Earth in order to deliver the prototype Gundam to the Earth Federation. Their hope is to turn the tide of the war against the attacking Zeon and their superior mobile suits. With the history of the show itself behind us, let's talk about Mobile Suit Gundam and the Universal Century. Prior to the start of the Universal Century, Earth's nations had formed into a collective Earth Federation government. In addition, Earth's population was soaring, reaching roughly 9 billion during the 21st century. With this record high came the problems of pollution and resource scarcity. It was decided the Earth alone could no longer support humanity. To this end, they began construction of a series of space colonies, the first of which, Laplace Station, would mark the beginning of the Universal Century. The Universal Century was used in place of the old Gregorian calendar, starting the year over at 0001. In a move that would foreshadow the coming horrors of the Universal Century, the changeover ceremony held on Laplace Station was sabotaged by terrorists, destroying the station and leading to the deaths of those in attendance, including Prime Minister Ricardo Marcinus. The original Earth Federation Constitution was also lost at this time. Over the next 40 years, the Earth Federation expanded into space. It constructed large space colonies in orbit around the Earth, as well as Von Braun City on the Moon. Roughly 40% of its population was moved from Earth to these new colonies. Many colonists were taken from lower classes and forcibly emigrated to the space colonies. More and more colonies were built and arranged into groups known as sides. The asteroid Juno was moved from its orbit and reorbited around Earth in order to better provide resources for the growing colonization efforts. This asteroid would later be renamed Luna 2. As the number of colonies grew, the Earth came to depend on the production from these colonies. Any surplus goods the colonies produced were sent back to the Earth, while the colonies were expected to support themselves. To ensure that the resources were sent back to the Earth Federation garrisoned soldiers within the colonies. These soldiers were also expected to be supported by the colonies. With soldiers stationed within their homes, and the expectation that they would always support the distant Earth, resentment began to build within the colonies. In UC-57, from Side 3 came Zeon Zoom Daikun. He argued that mankind should entirely move into space, and that the colonies should have greater autonomy from the Earth Federation. In addition, he believed that by moving humanity into space, the human race would need to adapt to its new environment. This adaptation would lead to the next stage of human evolution, the new type. Zeon Daikun claimed these new types would be superior to the old humans, claiming that they would have an expanded consciousness and be able to tap the unutilized portions of the cerebrum. This argument that those living in space were superior to those still on Earth resonated with the space colonists, and Zeon Daikun would be named the leader of Side 3. Zeon Daikun also gathered influential members of the colonies, such as the Rawl and Zabi families, to his side, and was able to secure a limited autonomy from the Earth Federation for Side 3. This new nation took on the name of the Autonomous Republic of Munzo. By UC-68, Zeon Daikun had turned the colonies of Side 3 into a thriving nation. With the aid of Degman Zabi and Jim Baral, Zeon Daikun was able to have the Republic of Munzo rely less on the Earth Federation. The Munzo State Security Police was formed to better protect its own citizens, and the Republic of Munzo even formed its own military force, the Munzo Defense Force. While the Earth Federation prohibited them from owning their own weaponry, they did offer to loan some arms and equipment the Defense Force needed. While it did not provide any heavier weapons such as tanks or military spacecraft, it was an important step for the fledgling nation. With the Republic of Munzo growing in strength and resentment towards the Earth Federation deepening, it seemed obvious that Zeon Daikun would declare independence from the Earth Federation. However, as he prepared to address the people of Munzo, he fell ill and was quickly escorted from the assembly. Zeon Daikun would die shortly after leaving his wife and 2 children behind. Although he died under questionable circumstances, it would not be confirmed if his death was a result of poisoning or due to stress. Shortly after, Sosro Zabi, Degwan Zabi's second oldest son, was assassinated in a bombing during Zeon Daikun's funeral. Dozal Zabi, one of his younger brothers, nearly died in the bombing as well, receiving extensive scars. Casilia Zabi, Degwan Zabi's only daughter and head of the Munzo State Security Police, was quick to place the blame at the feet of the Rawl family. Not long after, the Republic of Munzo would see brutal infighting between the Rawl and Zabi families as they struggled for dominance of the now leaderless Republic of Munzo. Jim Baral took in the widow and children of Zeon Daikun, planning to use their influence to regain control of Munzo. In the end, the Rawl family would see their hold over the Republic of Munzo fall, and the head of the Rawl family, Jim Baral, would flee Munzo with Zeon Daikun's children rather than be killed by the Zeon family. With the rivals defeated, the Zabi family was able to consolidate power and take control of the government of Munzo. The head of the Zabi family, Degwan Zabi, became the chairman and ensured his children all had positions of power within the government. 3 years after the death of Zeon Daikun, the Republic of Munzo adopted a new name. Taking advantage of Zeon Daikun's popular beliefs, Degwan Zabi renamed the republic the Autonomous Republic of Zeon. This would help to further divide the people of the space colonies from those still living on Earth and in the Earth Federation itself. Degwan Zabi not only changed the name of the Republic, but proceeded to expand the powers of the Republic of Zeon. The Munzo Defense Force became the Republic of Zeon Space Defense Force, while the Munzo State Security Police was formed into the Zeon Special Service, both of which answered directly to Degwan Zabi. About this time, the Republic of Zeon began development of a new weapon, the Mobile Suit. Adapted from the mobile workers often used in construction and debris clearance around the colonies, Zeon believed that it could be adapted into a powerful weapon. The mobile workers were bipedal machines, usually fitted with tools such as grabbing claws and hands, and stood about 50 feet high. It was believed these mobile suits would be able to move quickly and carry a disproportionate amount of firepower compared to the larger battleships and fighter craft of the Earth Federation. It's important to note that in the Universal Century, Minovsky reactors had largely replaced nuclear power. The reactors were much more powerful. However, the reactors had a secondary effect. They caused enormous interference in communication and many electronics. This meant that while the Earth Federation had battleships with powerful megaparticle cannons on them, their effective range, both in terms of detection and engagement, was extremely limited. A smaller unit that would be able to avoid the heavier weapons mounted on the Earth Federation battleships, while still able to use heavy explosives, could prove to be devastating against the Federation. Dozal Zabi championed the project, believing it would give Zeon an edge in a war against the Earth Federation. However, Giran Zabi was prepared to cancel the project. While the early prototype showed promise, it was limited due to the power consumption needs, which restricted its operating time and distance. It was at this time that Dr. Minovsky, inventor of the powerful Minovsky reactors, presented a compact Minovsky reactor that could be mounted onto a mobile suit. This would allow the mobile suits to operate independent of the large test batteries and reactors they'd had to use previously, as well as granting them even greater mobility, allowing the mobile suits to fully capitalize on the advantage their speed and armament would grant them. In UC-77, an accident occurs on Munzo. A Federation battleship crashes into a section of the Munzo colony, destroying an agricultural block and causing food shortages and further deepening resentment between the colonists and the Earth Federation. In response to the accident, the Republic of Zeon demanded independence from the Earth Federation government. Across the colony, anti-Earth Federation riots and protests began. The Earth Federation responded with lethal force, deploying soldiers in the streets and shooting protesters. The Earth Federation even deployed tanks in the streets to quell the riots. At this time, a number of cadets from high-ranking families were stationed at the Space Defense Military Academy. While the Earth Federation did not formally keep them hostage, the Academy was very close to the Earth Federation garrison. It was clear that while the Earth Federation was not taking the students hostage, if things escalated any further in the protests and riots, the garrison could take the Academy. Garma Zabi, the youngest and favorite son of Degwin Zabi, was enrolled at the time the riots began. Convinced by his friend Shar Aznable, Garma Zabi gathered a group of 200 students and prepared a surprise night raid on the 2,000-man garrison, planning to break the students out of the possible hostage situation. They were able to take the garrison completely by surprise. Using weapons the Earth Federation garrison did not feel were powerful enough to threaten them, the cadets managed a multi-pronged attack using long-range mortars and small jetpacks. They took the armory as well as the command tower from the garrison forces. By the morning, the students had control of the Federation forces' headquarters and forced the soldiers within the garrison to stand down. The fighting ended at daybreak and would later be referred to as the Dawn Rebellion. Starting in 0078, Zeon began to mobilize for war. Prior to this, Zeon had been quietly building its military forces, producing its own battleships and weapons in preparation for a war with the Earth Federation. The military focused its efforts on producing mobile suits and planned to make them the focus of their strategies. It was at this time that Zeon began mass production of the mobile suit that would be most recognizable during the coming war, the Zaku II. While the Earth Federation heard of Zeon's development of the mobile suit, concerns about the usefulness of the mobile suit would be largely dismissed. Some Earth Federation prototype mobile suits were developed around this time, but were largely inferior to the Zeon-developed suits. On January 3, 0079, negotiations between the Republic of Zeon and the Earth Federation for complete autonomy broke down. The Republic of Zeon would take on a new name, the Principality of Zeon, and declare war on the Earth Federation. This would lead into one of the most violent times of the Universal Century, the 1-Year War. I believe that's all the time we have for today. Next class we'll go over the beginnings of the 1-Year War, focusing on the 1-week battle, the Battle of Loom, and the early use of mobile suits. If you have any after-class questions, please send it to the course email at fictionalhistory101@gmail.com, or you can always send us a tweet at fichist101. That's FICHIST 101. Thank you for attending class, and have a nice night. I believe that's all the time we have for today. Next class, we'll go over the beginnings of the One-Year War, focusing on the 3-second warning, the Battle of Loom, and the early use of mobile suits. Thank you and have a nice night.